Eric.
Now it's live.
Hello, everybody. This is Eric Enge with Stone Temple Consulting. I am thrilled to bring to you today, we're all bringing this to you together, our Get Ready for the Voice Search Revolution video broadcast with, say hi, Mr. Duane Forrester.
Hello, everybody.
And say hi, Mr. Brent Csutoras.
Hello, hello. Excited to be here.
So the reason why it's the three of us guys is we've had our own sort of private club for a while. We call the Futurism group, where we talk ridiculous lengths about stupid and unreasonable things that might happen in the
they're
world.
reasonable. They're reasonable.
Eric, you know they're reasonable, Eric, because we're just going to extend human life by another 40 years, and then everything becomes fine.
I know.
Yeah,
I still find it a horrible icebreaker that the first thing I typically say to people is, I'm never going to die, and then they go, haha, and I go, no, I'm very serious. I have no intention of ever dying, ever.
It's probably better than you think it is, Brent, because I often start conversations with, "Hey, have you heard Brent Csutoras is never going to die?"
Yeah, see, there you go.
Conversations.
It is a great icebreaker for sure. but actually, what I was going to say before you guys jumped in, which is going to happen all the time here, because that's this group of people, is every once in a while we're right. And today we want to talk to you something that I think we're all convinced we're right about. And to open it up, I'm going to share just a few slides. Which will go wonky once I hit share initially, because you're going to see me populate.
Oh, nice. There you go.
And there we go. So just a few table setting slides, and then we'll pop back, and that'll be it for slideware. So here's market data on the adoption of voice. Thank you. And I love the quote on the right here from Enge, the chief scientist of Baidu, who is also a brilliant machine learning guy, by the way. That at least 50% of searches by 2020, that was the time horizon, are going to be through images or speech, which is by itself amazing. And that ties really well into our agenda of this being a voice search conversation.
So he's anticipating in 2 years, then, essentially, in 2020, we would be at that place, right?
Correct.
Well, remember that quote is a couple of years old now.
That is true.
Right. So we're, I think, maybe 3 years into the 5-year time frame, essentially.
That's correct.
And got to be honest, from where I'm sitting, I generally think we're pretty close to being on trend for that statement.
I agree.
I disagree, but that's fine.
Well, look at May of 2016, right? 25% of searches on the Windows 10 taskbar are voice searches. That's in 2016.
Yeah, but you also have to anticipate how many people are experimenting right now. And you always see a massive growth in any new technology with experimenters. And right now, with the number of purchases for a lot of these devices, the Google Home, the Alexa, a lot of these elements have a lot of experimental use right now.
Okay, hold on to that thought a minute, okay? Because
all right.
I know you're trying to say the three of us on this thing are the ones that are doing all the searches, and we're making up, 50%.
Yeah, exactly.
So data from ComScore, half of smartphone users engage with voice technology on their device, and many of them use the feature habitually. 1 in 3 use them daily. That's ComScore data. So now we're talking about more broadly about smartphone usage, so not just voice search. We'll talk about that in a moment. And then here's data from a Stone Temple study that we just published. The dark green bars are 2017, and the lighter green bars are 2018 data. And you'll notice that the first 3 numbers is kind of fluctuating, but everything from the 4th bar chart over is strongly in favor of 2018. And if you look through that, you realize that most of those are about behavior in public.
Yeah, I want to know who's doing it in the theater. Right. Who's that? Exactly. Who's that person in the theater whose voice?
So much growth in the theater voice use space and in the public restroom voice use space. I'm sorry.
Public restroom is at 25% that were, according to the survey, likely or very likely to use voice commands with their smartphone in a public restroom. That was the sense of the question. So, and my favorite way of explaining what they're doing is where's the toilet paper? But anyway, so that's
Amazon. I need an instant delivery.
And here's, I think, one of the great enablers, right? Is I think smart speakers are the spark that this revolution has been looking for. And I know what you were saying earlier, Brent, so I definitely want to get your take on this before we go on. But people are getting conditioned to use voice with devices through smart speakers. And there's about 45 million installed, in 44 million actually in the US today. But go ahead, comment on that before I show the last one.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about before. I think that there's definitely a space for people utilizing voice search, and smart speakers is a big part of that, especially in the car as well. When you have your smartphone, it becomes a voice speaker, right? I'll constantly ask questions when I'm in the car because I'm driving. I think there's a couple things that really kind of make me feel that even though this is a huge talking point, even amongst ourselves, I don't really buy into the timeline of this being as, adopted, because of the fact that, through all of my interactions, even when my children, who are, really the best use case of this, right? We start to see more normal language search, queries. People are less trying to do the individual keywords, and they're trying to talk to these devices like they were real, like a human being. They're having to ask questions 4 or 5 times. I run into situations where almost every time I try to use voice search, I end up having to repeat. It doesn't pick up fast enough, so I'm talking too quickly and I get half a sentence. It sends me on a rabbit hole, which now I have to figure out. And most of the time my result is, screw it, I'm going to look on the computer, or you know what, I'll just type it in myself. So I do think that even though there's a lot of usage and there's a lot of experimental, I hear people like Duane talk about how he uses his smart devices, and I think to myself, man, I want to do that. And I have an Alexa right here on the thing, but I never schedule a meeting, or an appointment through my voice search. I just don't remember to do those things. And maybe the younger generation will, but I think that the inability for the technology to truly allow an engagement to happen, I think it's gonna delay this a little longer than I think we think it will.
I'm gonna challenge Brent slightly on this.
Oh, please. I was going to ask you, Duane, why did we invite this guy on?
Yeah, I mean, he's like a Debbie Downer, right? Just there he is. No, it's I mean, Brent, I think you're speaking of these things from a completely rational standpoint. Like I get it, because I've questioned that whole thing as well. We saw all of the numbers over the holidays of devices that were sold, and all of the the Echo was the #1 device by a long shot. And so naturally, you have all these new people out there trying this, and they're yelling at their devices, and some are succeeding, some are failing. Some of them, the novelty wears off and they don't understand how to position it in their life. I think what ends up happening, though, is each of us individually are on our own curve, and we do find a point where we come back and say, I haven't used it in 6 months because I haven't really felt a useful need for it. And now I'm going to try this because this appeals to me. And actually that really added value. And it's that one moment in time of value add in the life that immediately gets the person hooked on using it all the time. It is a precipitous cliff when you adopt this technology in your life. So on two ends, what we see is so let's just call them millennials and Gen Z. Those folks are much more apt to adopt the new technology, get in there, try it, play with it, do those things.
Right. And one way that happens, Duane, I'll tell you what kind of was my precipitous event. And I've been arguing that this was going to happen, but I wasn't actually that much of a user myself. Mm-hmm. And then I was, my wife and I, Beth and I, were out to dinner at a friend's house, and they had an Alexa installed, and they were already heavy users. They had already gone over the cliff. So mm-hmm. I saw them using it, and I mm-hmm. said, "Okay, it's time for me to get off my butt and push the envelope on how we're using it." And we did that, and now we've got all kinds of things that are being controlled. We actually have both an Alexa and a Google Home. by either device. And we play with them both, and we get lots of questions answered.
And I'll jump in and say that I don't disagree. My brother, he has all his lights set up with smart technology. So we'll be sitting there watching a movie, and he'll go, "Hey Alexa, turn off the movie lights," and the lights go off. And then I saw him accidentally say "master" instead. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and his wife was sleeping, and it was master lights were about to go on, and so he's like, "Hey Alexa, turn on master light." And no, wait, no, not master movie. It's kind of funny. But my dad's also disabled. He's bedridden, and he uses Alexa a lot for his technology. But I think the second side of this is not so much me hating the adoption, but it also has a lot to do with data. Right? We have such a hard time right now because I want to embrace at a fully functional level on a technology that's not capable of delivering that. And I think that's, for me, it holds me back on my personal adoption, because I don't, when I search this and Alexa doesn't have that song inside of its music inventory, then it gives me some other music, or it suggests something different, or it plays something different. When I tell, my device I want directions to a certain place and that place is not found, then I find those pitfalls. So I just believe that, like, in the next 2 years, I don't think we're fully going to get there. And I feel like there's more energy on AI and augmented reality and virtual reality as far as research and development and investment and focus. And I feel like there's a chance that this quote unquote, voice personal assist type engagement will just morph into a different form by the time it becomes to a place where it both has the easy adoption, the easy interface, and the technology to kind of really support that data.
So before we go down
that rabbit hole,
AR, VR, augmented reality path, we'll call it, because that is exciting. Don't get me wrong, and we naturally get there from this conversation. There's two things that I need to call out. One, Brent, your point about your father using assisted technologies to literally enable parts of his life. That is a rapidly growing segment of a user base. And I don't recall this happening. Like, it's difficult to recall the number of times historically that an older generation of user has come into a new technology and then adopted it because it made their life better. Like, I'm thinking electricity, I'm thinking telephone, like I'm thinking of these base things. And this is what we are going to see as people's eyesight starts to fail them as they get older and it's harder to read. They will literally turn to these technologies. So I think we're going to see a very big swell, bigger swell than normal from this past sales cycle that will drive us. Whether we ultimately reach 50% or not, I don't know. I think we will, but then again, we could just as easily not. Something that is fascinating, though, and I think you guys may have picked up on this as well. The Amazon ad from the Super Bowl.
Yep.
Alexa's lost her voice. That ad, I had tears in my eyes, and I watched it over and over and over again because, it's funny, it's enjoyable, it's well executed, it's really well done. But there was a subtle message in there that is not a spoken message, and it's literally summed up in the closing moments of the ad when Alexa comes back and says, "Hey everybody, thanks, I've got this." And effectively what Amazon is telling everyone is the minutia of your life, the little things, connecting you with the people that matter, getting you the entertainment that you want, taking care of things in the background of your life when you're not able to focus on them, music at a dinner event. All of these things, we got your back. We got it. You don't need to think about it anymore. Alexa has it. And this is fascinating to me because it makes me wonder. Now, Brent, to your point, like every time a new skill hits, like I'm running the skill, trying something out, like finding where the edges are and what works and what doesn't work. One of my current big beefs is every time if I ask a skill something and I get the answer in Alexa's voice, I want to rage at the company and tell them you're missing a golden opportunity to create your own persona that is your brand. And
isn't it
right, giving that up, and it's like, why would you let somebody else's brand usurp your brand and knowledge? But I also think that there is a lot of opportunity here, and so many times these things are very limited in what they're doing. And so at that front end that you were talking about, Brent, like I want to go whole hog on all of it, right? And I want it all, and I want my life to be exponentially better and easier, because that's the promise of the technology.
Mm-hmm.
We are not there. But things like that ad make me wonder, the areas that they're calling out, that they are effectively demonstrating that they have mastery over, is that an indication of the main areas that consumers are focused on? And
Yeah.
if so,
Right.
this is identical to when...
It's the layup things that they can do reasonably easily and extremely well. Brent's comments about the issues with level of speech recognition, if you will, taken. The last thing that they can afford to do is have a very thin music library. I get that they might not have the specific song that you asked for, but that's pretty rare, probably, right? They have a pretty robust library. So they're trying to do things that are...
Eric, we should probably just admit this, right? Brent, I'm just going to come clean on behalf of Eric and I. Those instances when your Alexa device fails you, that's because Eric and I have hacked your Wi-Fi and we're blocking the question.
I got you.
So that music is actually in there. Those directions.
You know what I think is really interesting, though, with the statement from Amazon, is that Amazon has done a better job in some regards at accomplishing the internet goal, right? If you think about what Google's goal was, if you think about what Facebook's goal was, connect the world, Google's, provide information, right? A lot of the goals set, it seems that Amazon has really kind of come in at the right time to accomplish that for people. And they've done that by reforming the shopping cycle. They did that right from the start with reviews. I mean, you couldn't get a better place to actually find if a product was good than at Amazon. They set the standard for same-day shipping, for cheap shipping, for free shipping. They've set the standard for a lot of areas, and I think that's really kind of interesting that they're pushing into that space and they're kind of taking that step. And I think that, another thing you really touched on was the fact that as much as we as marketers think we know, it's super important to identify the changing in storytelling. Like one of the studies I love is that they basically define that the reason humans are successful is that we can tell stories, right? Pack animals can't communicate a story. They can't set a sense of standard that all wolves can live by. So they have only 20 or 30 and then they don't like any other wolf and they'll fight to the death the minute they see them. We have a confidence that when we walk down a street in a city we've never been to, that we're going to be approached and dealt with in a certain manner because of our stories, right? And so I think one of the things that was really important when Instagram and Snapchat and a lot of these things started coming on, and even when social media really became popular, is people were kind of like, this isn't going to grab, this isn't going to hold. And I think what it was a lesson for us to focus more on how people storytell. And I think that, as we're seeing a transition, we're seeing video and imagery and interaction storytelling being really the desired and the most effective form. And I think that, this voice search, and we call it voice search just for the sake of calling it that, this voice interactive technology really does sort of take us in line with improving the way we storytell and the way we hear stories in our life. And I think that's exciting.
Picking up on something you just alluded there to, which is we call this voice search because that's what the market is calling it, but that's not what it really is, right? It's, it's voice enabled to, voice activated control, voice activated, input, call it whatever you want. But search, makes it sound like you're just using it to do things in Google or Bing. But it's much, much bigger than that. So I think that's really important for us to keep in mind here.
And I think that's really true. I mean, as much as we talk about it, and, just before we started, we were having this kind of debate about like, what's the right name for this? Like everybody defaults to voice search. I find when I'm writing about stuff, I'm trying to avoid using the phrase voice search because that feels very limiting to me. And it's really about so much more than just search. you know.
Well, it was like my email to you guys before we started this call. I'm like, I know we're supposed to talk about voice search, but I don't really want to talk about voice search, you know.
Exactly. And it's but it's a fascinating, because as you dive into this, and I've spent time with, you know, the folks at Amazon, the folks at Cortana, the folks at Google Assistant, it's really fascinating because they don't have a focused storyline that matches with search. What they're focused on is consumer experience, discovery, and solutions. And that's, search is a part of those cycles, but it's a relatively small part of it. And then if you kind of move your head around to that line of thinking, this is where you start understanding the conversations like persona. I mean, we all talk persona as marketers, and we think, you know, demographics, let's put a face on the person, and so on. When one of the engines, or Amazon, talks about persona, they literally talk about Cortana's persona. And then that is a reflection of the brand, which is a reflection of the company. And so when I see skills or actions fail and default to the pre-programmed Alexa or Google Assistant voice, I'm like, missed opportunity. Why would you take that shortcut? Like, that's and those are the sorts of conversations. And when you start having those conversations, you realize how broad, how wide open this space truly is. Like, there's so much to consider beyond the aspect of being found in search and spoken out loud, why this is so important. If you watch that Amazon ad, it goes almost immediately into visual search, where the device is showing visual information alongside this. And that's because that's what humans want. We are lazy. We want it to be easy. I want to ask my question out loud and be given the answer in an easy to consume.
Let me ask Eric. Let me ask you a question.
Go ahead. Yep.
We obviously, a lot of people who are going to be watching this, a lot of our conversation, you know, a reason why it ties back with voice search is because people need it to fit into marketing agendas, right? You know, when it comes to really voice assisted technologies, and Duane lists, you know, these opportunities missed, what, as marketers in these companies, these SEOs, these companies, what options are there in your mind to participate in voice assisted technology? Because to me, when I look at the progression of it, it seems more and more limiting and less open to anyone participating.
Well, let me give you one, because we did this because, well, we've built an Actions on Google app, and we've built an Alexa skill. We've done both here, and we've gotten them certified. You can, if you have Google Assistant on your phone, you can pick it up right now without installing anything else and say, ask Stone Temple, and then pick an SEO question. The example I always give is, what is a no index tag? But it, you know, there's hundreds of different questions programmed in there. So in our world, right, as a digital marketing agency, that's not going to make, you know, anybody here rich, right? It's a bit of a novelty from a Stone Temple consulting perspective, but we have clients that we're working with, which are having issues because their competitors have launched a skill or an action, and they're getting a lot of adoption for their action. And here's the kicker, which most people don't realize, is it's even happening to us at this point, where somebody will come to Google Assistant, they'll pick up their phone and they'll say, okay, you know, what is a no index tag, to use my same example, right? And it will, the Google Assistant app will then prompt the user and say, Stone Temple has an answer for that. Do you want to hear it? So they don't even know about the Stone Temple app. And we're getting a good percentage of the volume of our usage of our app right now from people who have no idea that it existed. And so we have a major client. I can't say what area they're in because it'll become obvious too quickly who they are. But it's a very highly visible client that has a competitor that launched an app, and so did they. It's actually on the Amazon side of things. And their competitor is getting cited in lots of these queries without the user actually knowing about the app, and they're not. So they feel like they're losing real mind share.
Yeah.
And this is all surrounding information, answers, you know, some
Correct.
sort of information. Is there something where, like, one of the biggest things that I see as a potential problem, and that I think companies, I'd really like to figure out how people are addressing this, is pronunciation. There are so many, especially with startups. The idea is to create, you know, look, I can't find a .com, so I call it like Upwork, but I call it Upwork with a WIRK. You know, because I'm slick and I'm, you know, making my cool little startup thing. And who cares anyway, because I'm using the web and I'll just rank and everything will be linked. And then you go into voice and nobody's ever going to find, you know, Upwork with an I, you know, I mean, so you have to start,
Well, but
you know, but it does open up.
Brent, they could,
You know,
they could, though, right?
Issue.
No, they could be found, and that's the point. Is that this is a space of early adopters. This is a wide open area. There is a leveling of the playing field, because now we're back to large company takes time. It's a committee decision. Legal's got to sign off. So to actually get the action or the skill up and running takes a lot longer. To gather the data takes a lot longer. Small company, Eric, for example, we're going to put out 150 answers to the top 150 common questions and do a quick survey. You know, your number's 150, pull it together. Then they say, we will move forward. They move forward. And now they're an active participant in this.
Right.
Eric now has the opportunity to use this in marketing, so he can use it in pitch conversations. So if your in-house team needs quick answers to common questions to build presentations or train team members or whatever, you can use the action or the skill. And what we're actually seeing is that, and I believe this will be the future, when we see data that's been shared by either Google or Cortana or Amazon, what we tend to take away, and this is rare, but so far the data looks like most of the queries coming in are fresh queries. They've never seen them or heard them before. And that's because of natural language. We both, all three of us, ask for the exact same thing, slightly differently. The queries get individualized at some point, and the net result is, if you are an actual perfect match for that, you will be brought forward. So Upwork will be brought forward regardless of the craziness of its name and the fact that it's difficult, because behind these actual assistants is an app where all of that data lives in clickable scenarios.
But how does that deal with the fact where Upwork itself is a higher authority, more successful company that's also in the space? You're only going to get, you know, again, unless they come back and say, there's two answers for this. Would you like, you know, Upwork, the, you know, the contracting site, or do you want?
We don't know how that's going to unfold.
Right. Yeah.
We just don't.
One example.
Guys, we have an audience question that I just want to make sure that we put this.
We have an audience.
Well, yeah. So there was a number of people who decided we were worth listening to.
Wow, I thought we were just talking between the three of us. But I want to come back to one example afterwards.
I got to tell you the audience question, because what we're saying fits at least a little bit in the context to this discussion.
Cool.
Okay. And I just want to make sure that people know that we are going to respond to questions.
Maybe.
So it's actually Melissa Fash who asked about how you go ahead. Oh, Duane, you don't want to do it anymore? Oh, sorry. So she asked basically, how do you optimize? So Brent, it tied into the question that you asked me a couple of minutes ago, is, you know, sort of what are the business opportunities?
Sure.
She was focused a little bit more, well, she used the term voice search. I think we can take that at least slightly liberally and include, you know, other business opportunities. But before we're done, I want to make sure we work in some discussion about actually voice search.
Well, I mean, at this point with optimizing, I think that the optimization is, you know, are you there or not there? I mean, there's so few, you know, people really engaged in this space. And as you've kind of alluded to, a lot, in my opinion, a lot of what I see as the success from voice search right now is either accidental. It's just somebody's there and they're generally questions being asked, and so they're being resulted, or it's been promoted. where, you know, the companies are going out and saying, we have this capability, we have this option, go and use it. You know, one of the examples I was going to give, and this might be something that you could kind of say, how would you optimize this? You know, I was thinking about how companies could utilize voice search if they don't have information like to answer, like a professional skill or something that's, you know, detailed. And I thought, well, what if you had like a furniture store and you could say, what are the sales today at City Furniture? You know,
Right.
And then it could spit back like the current sales that it has. So you could potentially say something like, what's Crazy Eggs, you know, Apple, you know, laptop sales today, and have like a listing of products. And so that could be a way that any company could essentially start to, you know, provide some sort of, you know, voice search, you know, engagement.
Well, let's expand upon that a little bit, because this is going to tie back to the discussion you started earlier, Brent, and you expanded on it, Duane, which is it's like, how are you addressing what the customer, the user out there wants, the customer experience, or what they want, and how much of a push we're seeing towards using information and entertainment to build relationships with an audience, and trust and brand and, you know, all this sort of stuff, so that when they come to a point when they're actually ready to buy something, they naturally think of you first. Because I think a lot of the opportunity is in that space for all this.
So, but Duane, I mean, do any of you have like any ideas of like right now what you know, examples of actually optimizing?
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
I have six things that I believe actually make a difference. And this is where, and you know, it's funny because there's an undercurrent, a theme to all of this that I think you guys will back me up on this. It's a bit of a challenge sometime for a traditional SEO to wrap their head around these concepts, because a lot of these things are not direct SEO. They impact the world of an SEO, and SEO has to work on these things, but they do have an impact overall in instances of choice that the engine or the provider, so whether it's Alexa, Google, Cortana, or Siri, in the choices they make. And here's how I think this all stacks up. First off, the broader concept of digital knowledge management. First thing you've got to do, and I'll use a healthcare example here, you've got to identify everything that's important about your healthcare business. It's, you know, the usual name, address, phone, email, website, hours of operation. But in healthcare, that would extend to doctor's credentials, conditions treated, service providers, affiliations, payment options, provider options, medical papers published, and so on. Got to identify all those things, because then you can actually mark that stuff up in schema. So for me, the process is go to schema, take a look at what's available to me, and then make sure I've got content that matches every possible option in there that's applicable to my business. From there, I'm really solving mobile. I mean, we've got the mobile first index here. It's on top of us. It is how people are accessing information in a predominant way today. It will have an impact on who gets chosen for a spoken answer. So you can't look past mobile, got to have it. Secure. Secure is not a ranking signal, but this month, Google is starting to flag non-secure websites in Chrome. That has a direct impact on consumer.
And when it's not secure, it links to a page that talks about viruses and Trojan horses. It's like not beautiful.
Really inspiring for your site. If you like that, yes.
But I mean, like the average consumer is just going to back the heck away from that. They're not going to push through and educate themselves on it. So as a business, you've got to get on top of that. And while secure may not be a traditional SEO thing, if you want to optimize for voice search and you want to show up, you kind of have to play in there.
Well, but let me just comment on that just very briefly. To me, SEO is the business of deriving more traffic from organic traffic sources, right?
Absolutely.
So does HTTPS implementation help me with that? If Chrome is going to block my block,
yep,
so
completely.
It does. To me, it makes it an SEO.
Completely. No, I'm not saying this isn't SEO's work. My concern is that too many SEOs believe it's not SEO work. That's my concern with it. And exactly, that's wrong. Like,
and I mean, I made this statement just yesterday, but when it comes to mobile, I mean, just as a side note, I mean, the whole concept of looking at your desktop and then considering how your mobile looks is so not 2018 and forward. Like, I mean, at this point now, like I refuse, like every client we have, I'm like, I don't want to look at your desktop. I don't even want to talk about your desktop. Like if you're not looking at your mobile right now, then we're screwed, you know? So,
you know, it's funny because we are literally at the point where graceful degradation has flipped over, because now your graceful degradation is on desktop, not on mobile.
But I will take this back to my timeline thing. When mobile came out, like freaking what, 12 years ago, and it was like the next thing, and I was like, I don't know. It looks like we're gonna jump the ship on mobile. It wasn't until like 7 years later that it was all of a sudden like starting to come back as a conversation. So I still do think that we're way earlier than we think with voice search, and even I mean, just in the simple fact that nobody even knows. Even from listening us today, I would guarantee that anybody who's listening as a company is like, outside of you saying mobile and schema, they're like, I don't know what the hell to do.
Well, and that actually brings me to my last point, because if you want to compete in this and you want to participate in this, you need to start creating actions and skills. You need to just start defining what your brand is in terms of your company's persona and what that looks like. I mean, if you want to play Jeopardy on Alexa right now, you're interacting with the voice of Alex Trebek. It's exactly the experience that you think you're going to have. But I can go on to a brand name pizza corporation and I can order a pizza from them through their skill, and they're using the default Alexa voice. And I'm thinking, right, well, wait, when did we, like, there's a cognitive dissonance that happens, because I'm thinking, wait, I thought I was with her, and now I'm still with her. Is she ordering my pizza? I thought I was with the other business.
And this is how much of a perfectionist Duane Forrest is. It's not as good as the fact that you're one of 100 companies who is on the newest technology, but damn it, you didn't use the right voice. You know, it's the same thing I said. If I was going to give my advice right now of what you can do for voice search, it's almost the exact same thing I said a year ago for augmented reality. Nothing. There's nothing you can do, because right now, in my opinion, they're still testing everything. And there's no defined path for how anything is going to be resulted.
Okay.
I think
I'm going to argue with you now.
Okay, you can argue with me 2 seconds though. What I would say is I would continue to be abreast of everything that's happening. I would read all the dev forums. I would continue to test everything. I would continue to play with everything. I would watch all the news, and I would watch for the opportunity, and I would explore where I fit into the cycle. Where am I going to fit into voice search, so that when that really starts to break and you start to see clear paths, you're the first person to jump on board.
Okay, so here's my argument. Okay, there is something you can do, and you can do it right now to improve your chances in showing up in response to voice queries and on your Google Home device. Okay, so now I'm talking the Google ecosystem. But,
here we go.
And that is, you can learn how to get featured snippets for your site.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
That's what you can do, because there was a digital marketing agency called Roast. I shouldn't put them in the past tense because I think they still exist. There is a digital marketing agency called Roast that did a small study, 600-800 queries, something like that. But they found that 80% of the answers came from the featured snippet.
Yes, sure.
Yep.
And so, and there are things you can do to increase your chances of getting featured snippets. And this speaks, now I'm no longer arguing about the term. Now I am talking voice search.
Exactly.
And you can increase your chances of showing up by learning how to do that. And there is a process for doing that.
Sure, absolutely. And I think that, you know, that leads, you know, it also kind of alludes to, I did a podcast in the past with Gary Yesh, and we were talking about this mobile first, you know, kind of shift. And one of the things that he made a comment about that I thought was interesting was he said, you know, learn to write content like you approach Twitter. Like, and I asked him, I said, so are you specifically saying that when we go to mobile first, that actually having more condensed, less words, one kind of topic on a page is going to be more ideal? And he pretty much, you know, you can go back and listen to his words exactly, but he pretty much said, yeah, you know, you're going to want to learn how to be more concise. You're going to want to learn to be more specific. You're going to want to approach, you know, your web content as being very focused for mobile users. And so I think that ties into something to be said for, you know, these you know, answers, you know, the answer queries, is that there definitely is a sense. I know that, you know, even from your study, you can have a lot of content and it can still get picked. But I feel like from some of the things being said that we're going to want to segment into more specific single answer pages over time when it comes to a mobile first environment.
Yeah, but clearly you got to be careful, because you don't want to go down the thin content path here either.
Yeah,
right.
True.
So where you have too few words on the page. So we're not talking about having, on most pages, I should say, because I know there are exceptions to this too. There's exceptions to every rule that any of the three of us can talk about here. But and that is that you don't want to have a 3-sentence page, right? So, and I would also argue that if you're trying to get a featured snippet, you'll have that clean text block that, you know, states the question, and then nice, clear statement of the answer. And then what are the 2 or 3 most important subsidiary questions that people will ask? Cover those on the page as well, because Google wants the experience on that page. Same for Bing, which people don't have any idea how aggressive Bing is being about featured snippets right now. They're doing amazing work. But in any case, you know, they want the user to get their complete answer, even though they ask this question. They do want the other pieces there too.
You know, it's funny you say that, Eric, because I've noticed this in my own content development work, that I have started to change. Because normally I would just, I mean, you can go back to the Bing Webmaster blog and you'll see it, right? It's like blah, 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 blah. And there you go, right? And now I actually will do that. I write that in draft form. And then I pick out the question and I put it at the top. And then I create a summary answer from everything that I've written. And then from there, I start asking myself, like, what else might people be interested in? And it does a couple of things. One, if it's immediately germane to what I'm talking about, I can extend the article and answer those other questions. In a lot of cases, it becomes an obvious other article to write. And it helps with that content development then, because you're just like, oh, okay, now I know what to write next. And there's 3 more things that I have to cover on this. And then it comes back to working with my team to figure out, what's our content calendar look like? What do our resources look like? And scenario. Yeah.
Let me read you this real quick. This is what, you know, this is Gary's like word for word. And what he was saying was, I think you have a lot of content pages, content that you want to rank for, content that can satisfy a user. What I see a lot on desktop sites is that there are these massive pieces of text that are partly useless. And probably that's fine from a mobile index if it's gone. Right. So he's saying, like, on the mobile side, you know, don't fluff it out. And I don't think any of us, when we talk about having, you know, thin content or thick content, are talking about fluffing. But I do think it's a good point that he says, I do think that because the real estate on mobile devices is much smaller than on a desktop, you have to rethink your content strategy and what you put up on mobile sites versus what you have on a desktop site, because people don't read or consume content the way they do on a desktop site. So I do think that that's interesting to hear that kind of phraseology about content, you know. So I do think it's something to take into effect.
Here's what that tells me. That tells me that when we flip to fully mobile first indexing, and that's become our life for a year or two, the concept of a long form post or long form content is going to start having less and less value because of the reasons you just stated. People aren't going to consume that. They're not going to read that on their device. We may see a resurgence in that a couple of years from now if our voice assistants are now reading these things out loud.
Sure, like an Audible.
You know, yeah, exactly. Right. Like a built-in native Audible on my, you know, like, here, I'm on this page. Do you want me to read it? Yes, read it out loud to me. There we go.
Yeah, because in that sense, I'm going to want to hear more. I'm driving down the street. I want to hear about what's happening, and I want to, you know, hear follow-up pieces. You know,
it immediately converts every single website, every page of content, every blog. It immediately converts all of those into on-demand podcasts.
Right.
And so, you know, it's like, it's a cool idea. It's a cool adaptation. I'm not sure if we'll get there. We will, when we get to the point of having a digital agent, we will get there. But that's still years in the future.
Guys, we got a couple more audience questions I want to make sure we
Perfect.
take on
Perfect.
here.
Oh, yeah.
So will voice search / assistant need to have a database of questions and answers specific for search, or will index existing content / articles to find the best match? I
Yes.
actually, yes, I was going to say it's a 3-letter answer. The first letter is Y and the last letter is S.
Exactly.
So to that,
Well, what? Yes, to which side?
it's both.
Oh,
Both. If it were me, I'm gonna weight that. I'm gonna weight it to like a 60-40 toward current content being indexed versus creating specific databases that target this.
Right,
But I
where the
think both
database-
have value.
Right. But where
Yeah.
the database will help you is if you establish a trusted relationship, then you will have more opportunity to potentially get pushed by the producer of the digital agent.
So
I think
that's
like
interesting. Would Google open up a scenario in Webmaster or in Search Console where businesses could create their own API of data that Google could consume? So just like a
They're already
site
doing
map
that.
annotation.
they're already
Right,
doing that.
But is it really trusted?
No,
Yeah, I mean, it's partner-based
Right.
trust, right? So Google's
Right.
pulling in the non-URL data, right? So right now you can go and put an XML into Google and you can have
Yeah.
them index all of your data without even having a website, and you can show up in Google. Like,
right,
Right.
but specific to this, I mean, you can go to API.ai, which is where you
Mhm.
create an action on Google, and you can enter in a database of data.
Mhm.
And then what Google does is they test it to
Mhm.
see how the market responds to it. And if the response is good, then they start surfacing it. And Amazon does exactly the same
Yeah.
thing. All right. And they begin to surface it more, even without the person prompting your app. So they
Mhm.
have a way of testing and building trust in you.
Mhm.
Well, I would say we're going to continue to go through a transition of these engines and these companies wanting us to spoon feed them for a short period of time. What I would say is that I anticipate the answer to that being yes, you're going to want to have both until the point that they just stop using the other. You know, I mean, it's similar to all the things that we do. I mean,
Come on, Brent, that's never happened before.
No, never, right? But I mean, it's the same thing with a lot of what we do with Google, right? Is at a certain point, SEO was truly like an intricate skill set. I mean, just on page was everything. It was like H1s, H2s, everything, LSI. We need to make sure we have the right density. And as the technology improved, that became less and less important. Not that it's not important to have, it just became more of a baseline and not so much of a science, right?
But also the weights have changed. Like you're not going to tell me the keyword density is not something that an algorithm has programmed into it. It still does. The weight that's given to the importance of it is much less today.
But I think this is different. I think that there is when it comes to voice technology, I think that it's fundamentally flawed at the sense of having pre-designed questions and answers. I think that in itself is where the drawback is, and I think that the technology that's going into researching AI and researching these technologies and trying to progress it is to get it away from that. So I really don't see. I see kind of something where there's a dual impact, but not combined. It's Google's using two different scenarios.
Yeah,
and
there's a yes and a no to that. Okay. There's a yes and a no to that. If you're talking about information that is public domain-esque, that can be thrown into a pre-existing database, that's different from information that has to be sourced from a third-party specialized expertise. And third-party specialized expertise isn't going to go away just because we have AI, at least not anytime soon.
No, but positioning whether you have two different sources to provide the same information. That's what the question was. Do you need to have a database that's for serving search, and do you need to have a voice, text for voice that serves the voice result? I think that ultimately, you're gonna need both, but not in the sense that they both have to cohesively work together. I think that if you do that, you're going to miss out on some of the voice technology, in my opinion, if you're trying to limit yourself to what you would also do in a database, because I think that the technology is going to move past simple, Q&A environments.
Sure. Yeah, I agree that it will move past simple Q&A environments. We just have to differentiate between information that has to be sourced from a third party and information which doesn't.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, that's a given. I mean, there's definitely going to be a sense of that, for sure.
So there'll be information that gets accessed through some means by which the third party makes it available. And then there'll be information which is derived. And then so that's how I see that unfolding.
Yeah, and I can't visualize anything right now in my head just because of my upbringing of that not being text based. Just even if it's cloud and it's unformatted, in the sense of how we format, looking at a page, even if it's just like how true computers do their zeros and ones, right, with stop and end points. If it's just massive data, I still see it as a textual data. It's hard for me to envision a time when everything's truly audio, in the storage of everything too,
No, absolutely. All right, I have another audience question.
Although I don't know if we answered that last one.
Well, we kind of ran in circles around it.
There you go.
Which I think is the best we were going to do.
Yeah.
Don'ts for near me searches for local businesses. Okay.
Don'ts. Things not to do if you're trying to show up for nearby searches. That's very unique, depending on
Eric, was it near me or nearby?
Near me. It's a very popular form of query, right?
It is, but it's also flattening, right?
Because it's implied now. And
exactly. People get it. They don't say that out loud. In fact, if it's me, I'm questioning if I'm actually optimizing for phrases with those pieces attached to them. Because we know how that happens, right? Like, as soon as the search engines get a taste that consumers trust, they'll immediately start ramping down because they know. And that means they can include more things and they can do more to test more without having to be so explicit with near me. And then near me becomes it's just not a part of a query.
Well, I don't know that they're talking about the physical query of it. I think they're trying to say, is there things that would exclude me from showing up in that or help me to show up in that query? And even though it's understood, I'm assuming the question's more is there something that I should avoid doing? Right. That would potentially keep me excluded from being included in location search. I mean, I think, you should have zip codes and identifiers and cities and states on your content. I mean, if you don't have any identifiers, or a lot of people do this mistake, is that they focus on just our corporate office is in New York, but we're operating out of Florida and we want to show up in Florida, but they have no addresses in Florida. So I do think that zip codes and location qualifiers are important, to have a near me type of experience.
I'm going to add in on that. To me, this is very simple. Don't take shortcuts. That's the biggest don't here. If you can mark up your content because it's available in schema, go do that. Don't take the shortcut of thinking I'm only one local business, or I've only got 3 locations and I don't need to go do that, or that's too much work or whatever. No, go do that. Because in a world where everyone else around you does it, you're the one who sticks out for not having it. And that same world is also providing all the answers that searchers need. So the question then is, do you want to be one of those because you're going to do the work? Or do you want to take the shortcut, not do the work, and then therefore you will automatically not be one of those answers?
But let me throw up one warning. One warning. I hate more than anything, and nothing will cause me to dislike your brand worse than trying to manipulate the system and I show up at an address that's not you.
Oh, absolutely.
So that happens a lot. Companies don't, they put in addresses because they had a PO box somewhere or they whatever, and they're going to just go and have 5 or 6 addresses because they want to be in every city, and that is a killer for the brand. I mean, you're really going to, kill your experience. So don't do that stuff.
So guys, we've got 4 minutes left. So maybe we want to go through a round of wrap up comments. So who wants to volunteer to go first?
You go first, Eric.
Okay, I'll go.
Or you want to wrap up last because you want to be the final voice.
No, I'm happy to go.
Okay, go ahead.
So we've pushed this topic around in a number of different directions here today. I love talking with Brent and Duane. It's always awesome, and our conversations often, but actually they always sound like this. It's just the way they go.
It's true.
So we have a little bit of disagreement as to how quickly this is all going to happen. We know there's 400 million installs of Google Assistant that are active. We know there's 500 million installs of Siri that are active. That's data from both of those companies. The sales of smart speakers are going up through the roof. I think there are big opportunities for people right now to grab some brand market share and authority by doing things, by optimizing for these platforms and getting yourself out there. I urge you to consider doing it. It's not right for everybody right now. I'll be honest and straight up about that, but I do think you at least ought to consider it and see whether it's right for you. Who's next?
I'll go.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I wanted to let Duane have the last word. So I agree in the sense that I think that this is an important technology. I really think you should pay attention to. What I worry about is that people start feeling like they have to be involved. Right? It's like, oh crap, I don't want to be left behind. And what I would say is that in this space, I feel like if it fits for you, it's the example of Instagram. Everybody wanted to have an Instagram account and they had nothing visual to show. So they just started creating crap to show it. If you have something that fits for voice search right now, then you should absolutely take the steps that you can to participate with it. If you don't, then definitely pay attention to it. This space is going to open up. It is going to provide an opportunity for just about everyone. So stay abreast of what's happening in the space, what's the technology, and start envisioning your company in that space, and then wait until you have that opportunity to make that a reality. But don't overstress yourself and feel like you're failing because you're not in the space right now. It's still very limited for the right fit at this point, in my opinion.
So I'm going to end this on a note of FOMO, fear of missing out. And I'm going to give Brent props for his well thought out perspective. My thinking on this is that if you are not a part of this now, so rewind this slightly. When I was still at Bing, I would walk on stage and tell people, you need to mark up your content. That was over 5 years ago. And only now are we starting to see the true adoption of that. We are also facing an absolute truth that while everyone knows it, nobody talks about it, which is the average human being doesn't need the internet full of information that we have to make the decisions they ask for in their daily lives. What that actually means is we are going to be living in a world of limited number of answers needed for any given question. So the decades that we've enjoyed the internet, the expansiveness of it, and giving us all of that space and all those options, those are going to go away because consumer choice is going to narrow that down. These technologies are the beginning of it. Voice may not be for you, but you've got to pay attention. You've got to dig in now because visual may be for you, and that's happening now. And then what happens with the next assistive technology? What happens when we have digital agents who are tasked with filtering out information before we even see it? Because if that agent of mine doesn't trust your website for any reason, you are never shown to me as a consumer. Today's work is the foundation for all of that trust in the future. So shortcuts today, not an option.
There you go. All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching our event. This has been Duane Forrester, Brent Csutoras, and Eric Enge coming at you with our Futurism broadcast. There, I thought I'd used a label for it officially.
There you go.
There you go.
Get ready for the voice search revolution. Message us in the YouTube comments panel if you want to see more of this stuff, or if you hated it and you want us to go away forever. Let us know. Bye, everybody.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone.